"Solve this in 60 seconds." The billionaire smirked. The black waitress did, and his face drained. The crystal chandeliers of the Meridian Club cast dancing shadows across the mahogany tables, where Manhattan's elite gathered every Thursday evening for what they called intellectual discourse. But everyone knew the truth. It was a playground for egos, a stage where millionaires and billionaires performed their wealth like peacocks spreading their feathers. Among them sat Marcus Thornfield, a tech mogul worth $12 billion, his salt-and-pepper beard perfectly groomed, his Italian suit worth more than most people's cars. He loved these evenings, loved the way conversations stopped when he entered a room, loved how young entrepreneurs hung on his every word like gospel. Tonight, however, would be different. Tonight, a woman named Destiny Washington would show him something about himself that all his money couldn't buy or hide. Destiny had been working at the Meridian Club for 3 years, invisible to most members except when they needed their water glasses refilled or their plates cleared. She moved through the room like a shadow, her movements practiced and efficient, her face carefully neutral despite the conversations she overheard, deals worth millions discussed over appetizers, divorces planned between courses, careers destroyed with a phone call between sips of wine. At 32, she had learned to make herself small, to blend into the burgundy wallpaper and gold trim of this place that reminded her daily of everything she wasn't supposed to be. Her uniform was pressed perfectly, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, her name tag the only thing that suggested she was a person rather than part of the furniture. What none of them knew, what none of them had ever bothered to ask, was that before she wore this uniform, before life had knocked her down and forced her to start over, Destiny Washington had been Dr. Destiny Washington, a mathematics professor at Columbia University. The evening started like any other, with Marcus holding court at his usual table, surrounded by a group of younger executives who laughed too loudly at his jokes and nodded too eagerly at his observations. He was telling them about his latest acquisition, a small AI company he'd bought for what he called pocket change, $300 million. The founder thought he was clever, Marcus said, swirling his 50-year-old scotch, tried to negotiate with me. Can you imagine? These people don't understand that intelligence isn't just about what's in here. He tapped his temple. It's about knowing your place in the food chain. The group chuckled appreciatively and Marcus basked in their admiration. That's when he noticed Destiny approaching with a water pitcher, and something about the way she moved, confident despite her position, dignified despite her uniform, irritated him in a way he couldn't quite explain. "You know what separates us from them?" Marcus said louder, making sure Destiny could hear as she filled the water glasses around the table. "It's not just money. It's intellectual capacity, the ability to see patterns, solve problems, think abstractly. That's why they serve, and we get served." One of the younger executives, a woman named Patricia, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but said nothing. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a piece of paper, unfolding it with theatrical precision. "Speaking of which, here's a little puzzle I've been sharing with potential investors. It's a test, really. Separates the wheat from the chaff." He smoothed the paper on the table, revealing a complex mathematical sequence intertwined with a logic problem, the kind of thing that appeared in advanced placement tests for Mensa. "I've had PhDs struggle with this for hours. The record for solving it is 43 minutes, set by a professor from MIT. The puzzle itself was elegant in its complexity, a series of numbers that seemed random at first glance but followed a pattern based on prime number sequences modified by a secondary algorithm. Below the numbers was a logic grid with symbols that needed to be placed according to rules that weren't immediately obvious but could be deduced from the number pattern above. It was the kind of problem that required not just mathematical knowledge but intuitive leaps, the ability to see connections that weren't explicitly stated. Marcus had actually stolen it from a quantum computing conference, though he'd never admit that. He'd been using it for months to humiliate people he considered beneath him, watching them struggle and fail while he sat back with his solution memorized, playing the genius. Destiny had finished filling the glasses and was about to move to the next table when Marcus's voice stopped her. "You there?" he said, not bothering to look at her name tag. "What do you think?" Could someone like you even understand what this is? The table fell silent, the uncomfortable kind of quiet that happens when someone crosses a line but has too much power for anyone to call them out. Destiny turned slowly, the water pitcher still in her hand, and looked at Marcus directly for the first time. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black in the dim light, and there was something in them that Marcus hadn't expected. Not anger, not embarrassment, but something that looked almost like pity. "I understand it's a puzzle, sir," Destiny said quietly, her voice carrying a hint of an accent that had been worn down by years in New York but still held traces of North Carolina. "Would you like me to refill your scotch?" Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and cutting. No, I have a better idea. How about a wager? Something to make the evening interesting." He leaned back in his chair, his confidence radiating like heat from a fire. "Solve this in 60 seconds, the billionaire smirked. The black waitress did, and his face drained. But before that moment, before everything changed, he continued with his proposition. "If you can solve this puzzle in 60 seconds, which is impossible, by the way, I'll donate $1 million to any charity you choose. But when you fail, and you will fail, you have to announce to everyone here that you're not smart enough to understand it. Deal?" The entire room had gone quiet now, not just Marcus's table. Other members had turned in their chairs, sensing drama like sharks sensing blood in the water. Some pulled out their phones, ready to record what they assumed would be another demonstration of Marcus Thornfield's superiority. Destiny set down the water pitcher carefully on the side table, her movements deliberate and calm. She looked at the puzzle on the table, then at Marcus, then at the faces around the room, some eager for entertainment, others uncomfortable with the obvious cruelty of the situation. $1 million? She asked, her voice steady. "To any charity?" Marcus nodded, his smirk widening. "Any charity. But you have to solve it in 60 seconds, starting from the moment you pick up the pen." Patricia spoke up, her voice uncertain. "Marcus, this isn't really—" He cut her off with a wave of his hand. "It's fine, Patricia. I'm giving her an opportunity. How often does someone in her position get a chance at $1 million for charity?" He pulled out his phone, opening the timer app with a flourish. "So, what do you say?" He glanced at her name tag for the first time. Destiny. Interesting name for someone pouring water. Your parents must have had high hopes. The insult hung in the air like smoke, poisonous and thick. Several people shifted in their seats, but still no one spoke up. This was Marcus Thornfield's world, and they were all just visiting. Destiny walked to the table slowly, each step measured and purposeful. She picked up the pen Marcus had placed next to the puzzle, a Mont Blanc worth more than she made in a month. "Just to be clear," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. 60 seconds from now?" Marcus nodded, his finger hovering over the start button on his phone. 60 seconds from now. He pressed the button, and Destiny bent over the paper, the pen moving across it in swift, confident strokes. She didn't hesitate, didn't pause to think, didn't even seem to be reading the problem as much as recognizing it, like someone greeting an old friend. The first 10 seconds passed with Destiny writing out the number sequence, but not in the way Marcus expected. Instead of trying to work through the pattern step by step, she immediately identified the underlying algorithm, writing it as an equation at the top of the page. By 15 seconds, she had mapped out the logic grid's rules, her handwriting neat and precise despite the speed. 20 seconds in, members of the audience had started to stand, craning their necks to see what she was doing. Marcus's smirk began to falter slightly. He had expected her to be staring at the puzzle in confusion by now, perhaps making random guesses. At 30 seconds, Destiny had filled in half the logic grid, her pen never stopping, each symbol placed with absolute certainty. The sound of the pen on paper was the only noise in the room, a rapid scratching that seemed to grow louder as the tension increased. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes widening as he recognized that she wasn't guessing. She was solving it, actually solving it, faster than anyone he'd ever seen. At 40 seconds, she completed the number sequence, writing the final 3 numbers that the puzzle asked for, numbers that had taken that MIT professor 20 minutes to reach. 45 seconds. The logic grid was almost complete, just 2 more symbols to place. Marcus's hands had started to shake slightly, his phone trembling in his grip. The younger executives at his table were openly gaping now, and Patricia had covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes bright with something that looked like excitement. 50 seconds. Destiny filled in the last symbol, but she wasn't done. At the bottom of the page, she wrote something else, something that wasn't part of the original puzzle. At 58 seconds, Destiny straightened up, set the pen down gently on the table, and pushed the paper back toward Marcus. 59 seconds. 60 seconds. The timer on his phone beeped, the sound sharp and final in the silent room. Marcus stared at the paper, his face draining of color as he read not just the correct solution, but what Destiny had written at the bottom. This puzzle contains an error in the third sequence. The creator meant to use Fibonacci primes, not regular primes. The correct version would be... And she had written out what the puzzle should have been, a more elegant and more difficult version that she had also solved within the 60 seconds. The room erupted. People were talking all at once, some applauding, others pulling out their phones to call friends, everyone trying to process what they had just witnessed. But Marcus couldn't hear any of it. He was staring at the paper, then at Destiny, then back at the paper, his mind trying to reconcile what had happened with everything he believed about the world. "How?" he finally managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. Destiny picked up the water pitcher, her expression calm. "You assumed that because I serve water, I must not understand numbers," she said quietly, but her voice carried. "You assumed that because of how I look, where I work, that intelligence couldn't possibly live here." She turned to address the room, and everyone fell silent again. "My name is Destiny Washington. 3 years ago, I was a professor of mathematics at Columbia University. I have a PhD from Princeton, where I studied under Dr. Jennifer Chang, who some of you might know won the Fields Medal. I specialized in quantum algorithms and probability theory." She paused, letting the information sink in. "I lost my position during budget cuts. The university kept professors with tenure and connections, not necessarily those with the best publication records or teaching evaluations. I couldn't find another academic position. The market is brutal, and there are 100 candidates for every opening. My mother got sick, needed care that insurance wouldn't cover. So I took this job." Marcus's face had gone from pale to red, shame and anger fighting for control of his features. "If you're so smart, why are you still here?" he asked, trying to regain some of his authority. "Why haven't you done something with all that intelligence?" Destiny looked at him with that same expression she'd had earlier, the one that looked like pity but was something more complex. "Because, Mr. Thornfield, intelligence alone doesn't open doors in your world. Connections do. Wealth does. The right skin color does, the right accent does, the right last name does. I've applied for hundreds of positions in tech companies, including 3 at companies you own. Each time I was told I wasn't a culture fit or that they decided to go in a different direction." She set the pitcher down and pulled something from her pocket, a business card that she placed on the table next to the solved puzzle. "The charity I choose is the Washington Foundation for Academic Equality. I started it last year. We provide funding for brilliant students who don't have the connections or the background to make it in academia. Students who might end up serving water to people who think intelligence comes with a bank account." The card had a simple design, just the foundation's name and a website. "We've helped 12 students so far, working with the tips I save and small donations from people who actually talk to me while I serve them, who see me as a person." Patricia picked up the card, studying it with genuine interest. "This is incredible," she said, then looked at Marcus. "You're going to honor the bet, right?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone was watching Marcus now, waiting to see what he would do. $1 million was nothing to him financially, but the blow to his ego was worth far more. He could refuse, claim the bet was a joke, but everyone had witnessed it. Some had recorded it. His reputation, the thing he valued most after his wealth, was on the line. "Of course I'll honor it," Marcus said stiffly, pulling out his phone again, this time to access his banking app. "I'm a man of my word." His fingers moved across the screen, setting up the transfer. "What's the account information?" Destiny recited it from memory, and the room watched as Marcus transferred $1 million to the Washington Foundation for Academic Equality. The confirmation appeared on his screen, and he showed it to the room as if it were a badge of honor rather than a mark of his humiliation. But Destiny wasn't finished. "There's something else," she said, and the room grew quiet again. "Mr. Thornfield, that puzzle you've been using to humiliate people, you didn't create it. It was designed by Dr. Sarah Kim for the 2019 Quantum Computing Symposium. I know because I was there when she presented it. You've been taking credit for another person's intelligence while questioning everyone else's." The accusation landed like a physical blow. Marcus's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Someone in the back of the room laughed, quickly stifled, but it started a ripple effect. The Emperor had no clothes, and everyone could see it now. Over the next few minutes, as people began to disperse, several members approached Destiny, not with water glasses to refill or complaints about service, but with business cards, job offers, and genuine interest in her foundation. Patricia stayed at the table, engaging Destiny in a discussion about quantum algorithms, clearly delighted to talk to someone who actually understood her work. The young executives who had been hanging on Marcus's every word slowly drifted away, suddenly remembering other engagements. Marcus sat alone at his table, the solved puzzle still in front of him, his billion-dollar empire intact but his carefully constructed image in ruins. As the evening wore on, Destiny continued her shift, still serving water, still clearing plates, but something had fundamentally changed in the atmosphere of the Meridian Club. People saw her now, really saw her, and she had made sure they would remember. When her shift ended at midnight, she found an envelope at the staff desk with her name on it. Inside was a check for $50,000 from Patricia with a note. "For your foundation. And my company is looking for a quantum algorithms consultant, if you're interested. We need someone who can solve the real problems, not just memorize someone else's solutions." The next morning, Marcus Thornfield's spectacular failure was all over social media. Someone had indeed recorded the entire encounter, and the video went viral with the title, "Solve This in 60 Seconds. The billionaire smirked. The black waitress did, and his face drained." The comments section was brutal but not undeserved. People shared their own stories of being underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. Destiny's foundation website crashed from the traffic, and by the end of the week, she had received over $3 million in donations from people moved by her story and her grace under pressure. Marcus tried to do damage control, releasing a statement about how he had always supported diversity in STEM fields, how the whole thing had been taken out of context, how he had gladly donated to a worthy cause. But the internet never forgets, and neither did the members of the Meridian Club. His Thursday night audiences grew smaller, his opinions carried less weight, and he found himself learning a lesson that all his billions couldn't have taught him, that true intelligence isn't about knowing the answers. It's about recognizing that anyone, anywhere, might have something to teach you. 3 months later, Destiny Washington stood in front of a classroom again, not at Columbia, but at a new institute funded entirely by donations to her foundation. The Institute for Academic Equality was located in Harlem, in a renovated building that had once been a jazz club. Her students were brilliant young minds who had been overlooked by traditional institutions. A kid from the Bronx who had taught himself calculus from library books. A young woman from Jamaica who coded in 4 languages but couldn't afford college. A former gang member who turned out to have an intuitive understanding of complex systems that rivaled any MIT graduate. On her desk was the framed puzzle, the one she had solved in 60 seconds with her corrections at the bottom. Students often asked about it, and she would tell them the story, not with bitterness, but as a lesson. "Never let anyone else's limited imagination define your unlimited potential," she would say. "And always remember that the person serving you coffee might be solving problems you can't even understand. Respect everyone, learn from everyone, because intelligence doesn't wear a uniform, and genius doesn't always come with a degree from the right school." The Washington Foundation for Academic Equality grew beyond anything Destiny had imagined. Within a year, they were funding 50 students, providing not just money but mentorship, connections, and, most importantly, recognition. Some of the biggest tech companies started partnering with the foundation, not for the publicity, but because they had learned what Marcus Thornfield had learned too late, that talent comes from everywhere, and the companies that recognize this will be the ones that change the world. Patricia became a board member of the foundation and a close friend to Destiny. She would often tell the story of that night at the Meridian Club, how watching Destiny solve that puzzle in 60 seconds had been like watching someone paint a masterpiece or perform a perfect symphony. It wasn't just that she solved it, Patricia would say. It was that she did it with such dignity, such grace. She could have humiliated Marcus the way he tried to humiliate her, but instead she elevated everyone in that room, showed us all what we had been missing. The Meridian Club itself changed too, slowly but surely. The old guard, the Marcus Thornfields of the world, found themselves increasingly outnumbered by a new generation of members who valued actual achievement over inherited privilege. The club started a scholarship program, sponsored lectures by diverse speakers, and most significantly, began treating their staff as the professionals they were. Several servers were discovered to have advanced degrees, artistic talents, or entrepreneurial ambitions that the club's resources could support. The invisible became visible, and the club became richer for it. Marcus Thornfield, for his part, underwent his own transformation, though it was painful and slow. The viral video had hurt his business dealings, with several potential partners questioning his judgment and character. He hired a coach, not for business but for personal development, trying to understand how he had become someone who needed to diminish others to feel important. He made more donations to educational causes, though he did it quietly now, without fanfare or recognition. He never returned to the Meridian Club, the shame too fresh, the lesson too harsh. A year after that night, he wrote Destiny a letter. Not an email, but an actual handwritten letter, the writing careful and considered. In it, he apologized, genuinely and without excuses. He thanked her for the lesson she had taught him, though he acknowledged that his education had come at her expense, and he had no right to gratitude. He included another check for the foundation, but more importantly, he included a list of all the qualified candidates his companies had rejected for not being a culture fit, with a promise to re-review their applications with fresh eyes. Destiny never replied to the letter, but she did cash the check. Every dollar would go to students who deserved better than what the world had offered them so far. The story of that night became legend in certain circles, told and retold with various embellishments, though the truth was powerful enough without any additions. It became a cautionary tale in business schools about the danger of arrogance and the cost of prejudice. It became an inspirational story in community colleges and night schools, proof that brilliance could emerge from anywhere. And for Destiny Washington, it became the moment when she stopped being invisible, not because she had solved a puzzle in 60 seconds, but because she had shown everyone watching that the real puzzle was the assumptions they made about each other every day. 5 years later, Dr. Destiny Washington stood at a podium at the United Nations, delivering a keynote on educational equity and the untapped potential in marginalized communities. In the audience sat hundreds of delegates, educators, and policymakers from around the world. She told them about the night at the Meridian Club, about the puzzle and the prejudice, about how solve this in 60 seconds. The billionaire smirked. The black waitress did, and his face drained. But more importantly, she talked about what came after, the students who had been lifted up, the minds that had been recognized, the problems that had been solved by people who almost weren't given the chance. Intelligence is not property of the privileged, she said, her voice carrying across the assembly hall. Genius does not recognize boundaries of class or color. Every time we dismiss someone because of where they come from, or what they look like, or what job they're doing to survive, we lose potential solutions to the problems that plague our world. That night I solved a mathematical puzzle in 60 seconds. But the real problem, the one we all need to solve, is how to see each other clearly, how to recognize brilliance wherever it lives, how to build a world where no one's potential is wasted because someone else couldn't see past their own assumptions. The assembly gave her a standing ovation, but Destiny was already thinking about the next problem to solve, the next student to support, the next barrier to break. Because she had learned something that night at the Meridian Club too, that changing the world didn't always require grand gestures or revolutionary acts. Sometimes it just required picking up a pen, solving the problem in front of you, and showing everyone watching that their assumptions about what was possible were just another puzzle waiting to be solved. And if you could do it in 60 seconds, with grace and dignity while someone tried to humiliate you, well, that was even better. The Washington Foundation for Academic Equality now operates in 12 countries, has supported over 3,000 students, and has fundamentally changed how many institutions think about talent and potential. Destiny still teaches, still solves puzzles, and still remembers the weight of that water pitcher in her hand, the feel of that Mont Blanc pen, the sound of Marcus Thornfield's timer counting down 60 seconds that changed everything. She keeps the puzzle in her office, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that every person who walks through her door might be carrying brilliance that the world has overlooked, and that her job is to make sure they get their 60 seconds to prove it. And Marcus Thornfield? He became one of the Foundation's most consistent anonymous donors, sending a check every month with no note, no request for recognition. He had learned perhaps the most valuable lesson of his life that night, that true intelligence includes the wisdom to recognize it in others, the humility to learn from anyone, and the courage to admit when you've been wrong. He never solved another puzzle in public, never tested another person's intelligence, never again mistook someone's circumstances for their capability. The man who had once believed that wealth and position were measures of worth had discovered, in the most public and humbling way possible, that the real measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they do with whatever they're given, even if it's just 60 seconds and a pen.